Cool. Well, Alyssa told Ben and I that we weren't allowed to call an audible and just play with the dashboard for the last time, so I guess we're just gonna go along with this. This is our presentation called Shoot Your Shot. And so what we were working towards was kind of trying to look at how the on-ice situation, in this case, a power play, changes and impacts shot location and also the effectiveness of the shot. So the data that we worked with, and by we, it clearly means Ben, worked with was the tracking data from the 2021 Big Data Cup. He used all of the different events, and he did explain it to me, and then I instantly got confused and forgot about it all, as well as player info, such as their shooting hand, to look a little bit closer at how different players' shooting hand changed where they shot on the power play. So getting into the actual data, or the actual stuff that Ben found out was that, on the power play, you can kind of see here, sorry, I have to move the screen real fast, is that on the power play, shots were taken from farther out inside rather than closer up into the net. We also included the house, which is a statistical analysis thing that we pulled from someone else's data that I should have linked to on this slide that I'm realizing is not there now. Sorry about that, Ben. But it kind of, the data really made sense to me when I looked at it, because players tend on the power play to shoot from a little bit farther out just because of how the defenders are playing, and how the defensive strategy is going. They're pushing them a lot towards the outside. And so even though, like everyone else has said, we had a really small data point to work with, since it was the NWHL in Lake Placid, and as everyone has said, it's been a little bit smaller. It was nice to see that the kind of correlation that we were able to find led up to that. I'll hand it over to Ben for the rest.
Yeah, and so the rest of this was going to be looking at a little bit more of the specific situations, like how do righties and lefties shoot in the different situations, because as we showed on the last slide, shot locations tended to change from even strength to power play situations, which for me, without like as much of the hockey domain knowledge as Michelle, I was a little bit surprised by, until she sort of explained the concept of like zone defense in hockey and just trying to prevent shots that are in the house and right in front of the goal, and just to make sure we acknowledge the house thing that came from Greg Revak's Hockey IQ newsletter from like last September. So we can link to that if people have questions on it. But so here on this slide, we're looking at where players shoot and breaking it down by situation on the ice. And what was really surprising to me was that when we broke it down, especially lefty versus righty and in power play situations or not, there was a very clear pattern that sort of appeared that I was not particularly expecting to find. And that was that lefties tended to shoot from the right side of the ice, while righties tended to shoot from a little bit further back and from the left side of the ice. And I was surprised by that because, and that the fact that dominant hands were closer to the center of the ice, just more coming from a little bit more of like a basketball background where you attack from the right side using your right hand, and the whole concept of hockey using the stick, and you gotta get your dominant hand to move quickly. So that was a really interesting takeaway, I thought. And sort of a practical application of this would just be, I think, being aware of the skaters that the opposing team has on the ice. And if you're playing a team with a lot of righties, you want to force them to shoot. You want to force them to the left side of the ice where they're not as strong shooters, and vice versa. So that was one of the more interesting takeaways that I honestly didn't expect to find when we started this project, just sort of due to my lack of hockey knowledge, but it was cool to see that pop up. And then if we could switch ahead, that's all right. And then so overall, another thing we looked at was like what happens on a power play and how does it differ from an even strength situation on the ice. And intuitively, a lot more shots get taken, and a lot more goals get scored. And sort of to illustrate that point, 27% of all the goals from the big data set were scored on power plays, even though only 18% of actions were taken on power plays. And when I say actions, I mean the events that actually occurred during like live time on ice. So if you've looked at the data set, it's not the things like face-offs or like penalties drawn. It's looking at like passes, zone entries, goal shots, etc. And then we sort of see that difference again reiterated in the table down here, just looking at shot percentage, which if a shot goes in, if a shot is taken, how often does it result in a goal? About 6% in power play situations and 4% in even strength. And there's a slightly higher frequency of shots in power plays relative to even strengths. Okay. And then one other sort of a little bit more on the mathy stats modeling side, something I tried to do to sort of quantify that difference between power play and even strength situations was using a mixed effects model and treating whether it was a power play or even strength situation as a random effect to account for that variability from shot to shot. And this is sort of a method that I and other people have used in hockey and other sports, more to look at like player effects of things, like for example, like catcher framing in baseball, or I've done a project looking at like pass completion rate using a model like this. So it is a little bit of a weird sort of hack around to try to quantify this difference. But what we did see was that in power plays, there's a positive effect on shot percentage, while even strengths relative to power play situations, it's harder to score in even strength situations, and which intuitively makes sense. If there are more players on the ice, it's harder to get closer to the goal, and getting closer to the goal is where you take your best shots. And so it was cool to see that all sort of come together and make sense in a way. Yeah, and just to wrap up, not sure if there are any questions because I don't see the chat right now, but thank you to Alyssa, Carly, and Mike for putting on the conference. And then you can find me on Twitter, find Michelle on Twitter, or at the Ice Garden. So yeah, we will open up to questions now.
Oh, I forgot to mute myself the entire time. Apology for you guys hearing me clicking my mouse that entire time. Chat didn't go. I was just waiting to see if there's any questions in chat. But yeah, there has been a couple of people saying, I feel like this is information that goalies are going to want to have, particularly in regards to like shooting locations and stuff like that. Though Mike has jokingly said, I still need more data to confirm that we need to shoot, to be honest. That was not a valid answer, Mike. We will not be accepting that as a valid answer. But yeah, thank you so much for both of you presenting. We are gonna, oh wait, we got a question. I will not be pressing that button. How valuable do you think this data would be to goaltenders when it comes to scouting other teams, specifically looking at the power play?
Probably pretty high. I mean, you have one less defender, not necessarily one less defender, but you have one less person out there to help defend. And so I think if you can predict that they're going to come from, I already can't remember if we said a little bit further out or a little bit closer, which proves how well I paid attention.
Righties come from the left side of the ice, lefties come from the right side of the ice. So flip it.
So if you can predict that a little more, and you, I think especially in a smaller league like the NWHL, where there's a lot of familiarity with the players and your opponents, kind of having that information in the back of your mind is always going to be helpful for your goaltenders.
Awesome. Well, we will transition on to a short break before we head to the media panel. Thank you to Michelle and Ben. This was an excellent presentation, and it's been lovely hearing from both of you.
Thanks, Alyssa.
Thank you.